Hello and welcome back. Today we will do the last quiz, which will be exercises quiz 3. And let's see. This quiz tests generics traits. An imaginary magic school has a new report card generation system written in Rust. Currently, the system only supports creating report cards where the student's grade is represented numerically. For example, 1.0 to 5.5. However, the school also issues alphabetical grades A+ to F-, and needs to be able to print both types of report card. Make the necessary code changes in the struct report card and the implementation block to support alphabetical report cards. Change the grade in the second test to A+ to show that your changes allow alphabetical grades. So as you can see, we have here a public struct report card. It has 3 members: grade, floating point number, student name string, and student age, unsigned integer of 8 bits. Then over here we implement a method called print, which is also public. It takes self as an immutable reference and it returns a formatted string. And this string basically prints out the members of this struct. So we have student name, student age, and self grade. Now again, this won't take ownership of the self, it will just have the references. And let's see the tests. So over here we have generate numeric report card. And here we have an instance of the report card struct. And basically we pass it a floating point, a string, and an unsigned integer. And this test will pass without any problems. As you can see here, the first one is actually okay without us doing anything. And here you can see this should be the final output. Tom Riegel 12 achieved a grade of 2.1. Now the problem, as you can see here, failed. The problem really lies in the second test. And here we have a to-do. Make sure to change the grade here after you finish the exercise. So here again we have an instance of the struct report card and we pass it basically the same values. So we have here floating point number, we have Gary Plotter, and we have an unsigned integer. But this should actually be the output. Gary Plotter 11 achieved a grade of A+. So we basically over here have to change that to A+. And as you can see over here, this won't work because grade is actually expecting a floating point number. So what will we do? Of course, we will here declare a generic type T. Then we can use it over here like that. And what this basically does, if you saw my video on generics, you will get what I mean. This is just a placeholder for any possible type. So this type really can be anything. And then over here, the second one, we also have to declare the generic type so we can basically use it, because we want to use it over here. Now, as you can see, we have here a generic type. which this member is the type of generic, so this will have a generic type. So we have to implement something called display trait. And display trait basically allows us to print out the value among other things. And you can see this here in the documentation. You have a lot of implementations for many other types. So for example, I8, F64, F32, char, bool, all of them can be printed out without any problem. But over here, this one, great, as it is of type generic, we have to actually implement this trait. And as you can see here, this is the source, and we can basically just import it. So I will go over here. Let's go over there, and I will just use standard FMT. This is utilities for formatting and printing strings. And we have the display trait. And as you can see, format trait for any empty format. As you can see, this is exactly the syntax we are passing to print line macro. So let's import that, and then we can actually use it over here. So we can then say that we want this generic type T to implement the display trait. So if we pass something that does not implement the display trait, we will get a compiler error. But as you can see, we are passing a string, and strings, of course, will implement the display trait, and also the floating point value over here also implements the display trait. As you can see here, we have our floating point, and the default in Rust is always F64, and we have, of course, string slices, and strings should also be in there as far as I remember. Let's see, let me just string. As you can see, it's over here, implement display for string. So string also implements this, so we can without problem pass it a floating point. This is of type F64, and we can pass it a string, and we can even, let me see, we can make it like that, a plus to string, and I use this time this syntax instead of using string from, and that's just because I want it to be consistent. So here this one has been used, so I will use the same one. All right, this is basically it. I hope it will compile. And again, just very briefly, we just defined here a generic type and then used it over here for grade, and then in the method we actually say that we want a type that implements the display trait, and then we can print it out without any problem. So I will save that, and as you can see, it is compiling. So we are done with the last quiz in this Rustling course. And really, this one was pretty simple, but I encourage you to really read in the Rust book, or Rust by example is also pretty good, because there is a lot more to traits and generics. And let me see the next topic. The next topic will be tests. See you then.